Look at your own life. Now delete 18 years from the middle of it, not your childhood, not your final chapter, just the years where you became who you are. That's what happened to the most written about man in history. Between the age of 12 and the age of 30, the Gospels give you nothing. No stories, no sermons, no miracles, just silence. And it turns out that silence might be stranger than any myth built to fill it. Open your Bible to Luke chapter 2. You'll find Jesus at 12 years old, sitting in the temple in Jerusalem, astonishing the religious scholars with his questions. Then the text moves on. The next time you see him, he's roughly 30. He's walking into a river to be baptized by his cousin John. 18 years pass in a single sentence. Historians call this gap the lost years, sometimes the silent years. Why would the writers skip the most formative decades of a person's life? Here's the plain explanation first. In first century Judea, most people didn't write down the ordinary parts of anyone's life. Only kings, generals, and miracle workers got biographies. An unremarkable young man working in a small village wasn't considered worth recording. Jesus was, according to the Gospels, a tekton, a Greek word usually translated as carpenter, though it more likely meant a general craftsman who worked with wood, stone, and sometimes construction. Picture someone today working a trade job, quietly, for 2 decades, before anyone thought to write his story down. You're not the first person to feel unsatisfied with that silence. Early Christian communities felt it too. In the 2nd century, a text called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas began circulating. It filled in Jesus' childhood with dramatic, unsettling stories. In one, young Jesus shapes clay sparrows and brings them to life with a clap of his hands. In another, a boy bumps into him in the street, and Jesus strikes him dead on the spot. Church leaders read these stories and rejected them almost immediately, not because they doubted Jesus' power, because a magical, sometimes vengeful child clashed with everything the Gospels were trying to say about who he became. So the text got labeled apocryphal, a word that simply means hidden or set apart. And it was excluded from the Bible you read today. The mystery didn't disappear. It just moved into the margins, into manuscripts most people would never see. But that wasn't the last attempt to fill the silence. In 1887, a Russian journalist named Nicholas Notovich published a sensational claim. He said he'd found an ancient manuscript in a monastery in Ladakh, high in the Himalayas. The manuscript, he claimed, described a young man named Isa, who traveled from Jerusalem to India and Tibet during his missing years, studying with Hindu and Buddhist teachers before returning home to begin his ministry. The book became a sensation across Europe almost overnight. Then people started checking. Scholars traveled to the same monastery Notovich described. They asked the monks directly. No manuscript existed. No monk had ever heard of it. Historian Max Mueller, one of the leading Sanskrit scholars of his era, investigated the claim and found no supporting evidence anywhere. Most historians today, including biblical scholar Bart Ehrman, treat the Jesus in India story as a fabrication, a beautiful piece of religious fan fiction with zero manuscript trail behind it. So if Jesus didn't travel the world, what was he actually doing? This is where the investigation gets interesting. In the 2000s, archaeologist Ken Dark led an excavation beneath a convent in Nazareth. He uncovered the remains of a 1st century home, cut partly into rock, with pottery and tools dating to exactly the period Jesus would have lived there. Dark was careful. He never claimed this was definitely the house Jesus grew up in, but he did confirm something important. Nazareth in this period wasn't a myth or an empty hillside. It was a small, real, working village of maybe a few hundred people, and its houses looked exactly like the kind of home a craftsman's family would have lived in. There's another clue historians point to, just 4 miles from Nazareth, a city called Sepphoris. In Jesus' childhood, Sepphoris was being rebuilt into a major Greco-Roman city, full of Roman-style construction, columns, and public buildings. Biblical historian Richard Beatty argued that a tekton from Nazareth, especially one skilled in stonework, would almost certainly have found steady work there. Picture a teenage Jesus walking those 4 miles most mornings, hauling tools past Roman soldiers and Greek-speaking merchants, absorbing an entire world far more cosmopolitan than the quiet village he went home to at night. No monastery in the Himalayas required, just a construction site hiding in plain sight, a short walk from home. Scholar Geza Vermes, one of the most respected historians of the historical Jesus, argued something quieter and maybe more radical. He believed the missing years weren't hiding a secret journey at all. He believed Jesus spent them exactly where the text implies, in Nazareth, learning a trade from his father, studying Torah in the local synagogue, absorbing the rhythms of Galilean village life. No pilgrimage, no hidden monastery, Just an ordinary young man becoming an extraordinary one. Here's the twist that reframes the entire mystery. You've been taught to think of these 18 years as a hole in the record, something suspicious, something hidden on purpose. But historians studying ordinary life in antiquity will tell you something uncomfortable. Almost nobody from this era has a documented young adulthood. Not Jesus, not his neighbors, not the merchants of Nazareth or the fishermen of Galilee. The silence isn't unique to him. It's the default condition of being an ordinary person in the ancient world. What feels like a hidden chapter might actually be the most human thing about the entire story. A period so unremarkable, so quietly normal, that nobody thought to write it down until it mattered. And maybe that's the part worth sitting with. Think about your own life right now. Somewhere in your 20s, or in the years before whatever moment mattered most to you, there was a stretch nobody documented. No one filmed it, no one wrote it down. You were just working, just learning, just becoming, quietly, in a room nobody else thought to look into. Then one day, you walked out of that room a different person, and the people who only knew you from that point on had no idea what shaped you to get there. That's the part of the story that isn't in any apocryphal gospel, any Himalayan manuscript, or any archaeological dig. It's the part historians can only gesture toward. 18 years of ordinary work, ordinary study, ordinary life, building quietly toward a single moment at the edge of a river. So now delete 18 years from your own life again. Except this time, ask yourself which years those would be, because somewhere in that silence, in yours and in his, is probably where the truth actually lives.